Welcome to FMH Insurecast, a podcast created by Farmers Mutual Hail designed to deliver expertise and insights from trusted FMH team members and industry experts. Each new episode will dive into new products, industry updates, and innovative solutions. Let's get to today's topic.
Well, hello and welcome back to the FMH Insurecast. Today we are here to discuss the performance of ECO and SCO from 2023. We just got those yields released recently. We're going to give an update for farmers and policyholders on recent news of a subsidy increase for ECO and what farmers should consider with these updates and how it impacts their future crop insurance decisions. So Ken Ripley is going to be my guest here today to talk about these topics. I'm especially excited because ECO was actually the first ever episode we did.
Yeah.
And that first ever episode was, I don't know, about August or September of 2021, I believe.
Yeah. It's been a while ago.
It has been.
It's awesome to be back.
All right. And so not only are we here to talk about a change to ECO, but in the short history of ECO, we just released the largest batch of payments that we've ever had under the enhanced coverage option. So let's start right there. Ken, I don't know that we need to reintroduce you again, but you are a regional sales manager for Northwest US. And tell us a little bit about your farm and where you're at again.
Yeah. So live and farm up in Blue Earth, Minnesota. Unfortunately, right this year is one of the harder hit areas as far as how crops look. When I drove down to Des Moines here, I got really jealous because crops look really good through central Iowa. So that's where I'm from and wish I was a little further south this year.
And I'm Ryan Bennis, and regional sales manager in the Great Lakes area, which is Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan. But I actually live here in central Iowa. So I guess if I were a farmer here, I'd be happy, but I'm just sell this stuff.
That's all right. That's all right. Let's stress that way.
There you go. Okay. So it's actually June 19th today. It's Wednesday, but on technically Thursday, but really Friday, RMA released the 2023 final county yields for all of our major spring crops. And so that included our major crops like corn and soybeans. Those yields were released on Friday, and then starting on Monday and through yesterday, basically, FMH, along with a lot of the other AIPs, were paying out the county endorsements or plans that are associated with those yields. So the big ones being ECO, that's enhanced coverage option, SCO, that's supplemental coverage option. We also had margin protection in that batch. And then if there were some area plans out there, some of those area plans are also paid off of these yields. So not only was it just the yields that were released, but oftentimes we're talking about the revenues coming out at the same time. We already knew what our beginning and ending prices were, but we didn't know the yields. The price was the story, though, for 23. Tell me a little bit about that, Ken.
Yeah, especially on corn. That was the big driver. We were down 17%, if I remember right, last fall. So that was a major driver. Apologies, I don't remember exactly what beans came down.
7%.
7%.
It's in the notes, Ken.
It's in the notes. Yeah, 7%. So obviously also helped trigger things, but that 17% drop on corn or 17.5% drop on corn was a major contributor to those. And there's areas not too far east of where I live, major drought this last year. So significant yield loss. Combine those together, those producers that had ECO are smiling from year to year, thankful for what the payments they're getting here right now.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with a few numbers. I'm going to sprinkle in a lot of numbers. I don't want to bombard you, but just to give you an idea how large a scale this was, taking all of the states that have significant corn production, if we look at all those counties, there's 1,500 counties in that area. 81% of those counties triggered an ECO payment on corn if they took revenue.
That's any type of payment.
That's
not a full payment. It's any percentage of loss would be in that 81%.
So a little over 4 out of 5 counties triggered a 95% ECO payment. So that's a pretty incredible number. Can remind me though, just starting with that What triggered this payment? How does ECO work where we have that combination of price and yield, and why did we trigger so many?
So the big one, obviously, we just talked about would be the price reduction, but the counties that also had, so there's an expected county yield. So every county in the nation has a yield determined by the RMA of what is like the APH is how we should probably think of it, the APH for the county. So we're getting 95% of that. So price itself dropped us down into payments, in many cases, the full payment, but in cases where we had good yields, they maybe just got partial payments. But it's a combination of getting a 95% below the expected county yield, both from a revenue and a yield point together.
Right. And across the US, yields were not that bad. In fact, in total, USDA says we had the best corn crop ever, right? I think it was 181.3.
Yeah. Yep.
That was the corn yield across the nation, but yet we still triggered all these payments because of what Ken mentioned with that 17% price drop. And so to give you another number there, essentially, if your county didn't have at least 115% of your expected yield, you would have gotten an ECO payment. So as an example, we have a lot of counties in the Midwest that are around that 200 bushel expected yield. If they were anything less than 230, they were getting a payment on a 95% ECO plan. So pretty impactful. And so if you weren't getting a payment on ECO, that means your county had probably one of its best years ever. Really, really good.
Yeah. And also over the last few years, the RMA has really got those expected county yields in not all counties, but in many counties, those yields are really very close to what a producer is expecting to grow. Like, for example, the county I'm from, 211 was the expected county yield for corn. That's a very good APH for the county from a county plan. So that also contributed to the performance this year.
Yeah. So price drop definitely triggered in so many of those areas. So obviously, there's going to be some sprinkled in that also had yield issues, but for the most part, one of the reasons we really have always loved ECO is because of how well it mimics price protection or a subsidized put option. It's not exactly the same because we have that yield element to it, but the value that you get with it is so good, and especially when we had those high commodity prices. We started 23 with a corn price of 591 for most counties, and we finished at 488. And when we had those higher commodity prices, it just felt like it was unfortunately a matter of time. They don't high prices cure high prices, right?
Absolutely.
And so when we had that big slide down, we were kind of anticipating it. We weren't sure if it was 23, 24. Who knew? It ended up being 23. We had that price drop, triggered a ton of payments. So covers price really well. ECO also does a very good job of covering some area-wide losses, mainly drought, right? So price hits everybody. We have price falling. Drought tends to hit an area, not just specific farmers. I will say that ECO and SCO, we have left that out of the conversation a little bit here, don't do as good a job protecting farmers from those smaller losses, the spot losses like from hail or wind or disease that are usually isolated to very small areas within a county. But that said, this is why we've always been talking about ECO and SCO. And we're excited because there's even more news to share here on ECO. And we'll get there in a second. But anything else you wanted to pull out? I know you've been looking at some numbers yourself. I did pull the numbers for the different percentages of counties that were triggered to get you an idea on beans. The total percentage of counties that triggered on beans for ECO was 50%. Again, that's at 95% trigger with a RP policy. So not quite or half, still pretty good on the soybeans. And then SCO, which again, we haven't talked as much about. Corn has triggered in 46% of the counties, and soybeans was 26. And there's slight differences between irrigated and non-irrigated. Ken, do you want to speak to your region a little bit about what you saw up there?
Yeah. So, like say the the ECO itself definitely had significantly more losses, like we're talking, because that's the 95 to 86% coverage band. I think the thing that surprised me the most is how many counties triggered some partial, or if you're buying, let's say, an 80% multi-peril, that SCO triggering that full 80 to 86. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen that in a while. So that's to have like say 46% on corn triggering in that band. There's counties in northern Iowa that I know of that had 100% payment in those upper bands of SCO. So that's it's providing good protection, like we've been talking about. It's when you have the droughts, when you have the big price drop, the combination, the area plans do provide that protection for a much higher subsidized product, which is great.
Yeah. A couple of things I pulled out of these numbers when I was looking into some details. Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, the percentage of counties that triggered there were not as high, mostly because they had really amazing yields, some record yields in a lot of those counties out there. Also notice, though, moving to the west, I think I'm going to pull the states of Nebraska and Kansas out. And I think those two states have been a little bit more hesitant with these county endorsements because they do have more of those spot losses. And also being underwater, a lot of those literal water irrigation, not underwater like you're underwater, Ken. A lot of those counties were less apt to take those county endorsements because they were more concerned about hail and wind, and they had one of those major issues off the table. However, the expected county yields for those irrigated counties in Nebraska and Kansas are really good.
Yeah.
And so it actually makes it more difficult for those producers to take the top off the expected yields. And so when we have a big price drop like this, all those irrigated counties basically triggered. 103 out of 105 irrigated counties in Kansas triggered on ECO. 90 out of 91 in Nebraska triggered on ECO for irrigated counties in Nebraska. So if you're looking at ECO just as yield protection, I can totally buy that the irrigated may not make a lot of sense. But in terms of price protection, it did an excellent job of protecting those producers against price.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing, too, I mean, looking at some of the South Dakota counties that I cover, one thing that I found that was interesting is truly last year's weather was the haves and have-nots, and we could be talking 30 miles difference. One county triggered 100% on ECO, and the next county triggered 44%, but they had record yields in that county. So number of producers, I have talked to several agents here in the last few days, that the producers that had good crops and getting an ECO payment are really, really liking this program. So especially when the troubles we've had with prices. I mean, no matter how good you yielded, unless you're a really great forward marketer on grain, we left a lot of revenue on the table from a cash sale of the grain. So I know there's a lot of producers right now that are really enjoying this influx of cash at a cash tight time in the farm economy. So that's definitely a plus for producers.
Yeah. So in addition to all the payments that are going out this week for ECO, SCO, and margin, why don't we throw a little gas on the fire, Ken?
Let's go.
Let's throw a little gas on the fire. The gas is going to be the fact that ECO's subsidy rate is moving from 44% up to 65% for the 2025 crop year. Wow. That's big. That's significant.
21 points.
21 points.
Unheard of.
And if you happen to have that premium bill around from last year and you looked at your ECO premium, you can take that times about 62%, and that's how much the premium would cost with this new subsidy environment. So it is a significant amount. Per acre cost on ECO, if you went all in and you bought it at 100% last year, was probably around $30 for a lot of farmers. This next year, that's going to be $18.75. So it definitely makes it more affordable, and we can see how effective it is.
Yeah. Just for clarification,
yes.
too, just a reminder, that's 2025.
Yes.
So if you bought ECO in 2024, it's not retroactive. It's the 25 crop year forward. So unfortunately, it's not retroactive.
That's right. That's right. No, thank you, Ken. So to be clear, ECO, this change with the subsidy is not in the Farm Bill. We talked previously about SCO being potentially increased in the subsidies through some of the Farm Bill proposals that we've seen out there so far. That is still a possibility, but this change for ECO is effective for 25 and it's not pending the Farm Bill. It's already been done. So, very excited about that. That came about a little bit because of a new product that is going to be available for 2026, which is MCO, which is going to be a whole nother episode, I'm sure, at some point. But MCO is margin coverage option, just a mashup basically between ECO and margin protection. That will not be available until the 26 crop year, so that will be marketed next fall. But in the meantime, we will have that better subsidy available on ECO, and really it'll be starting here with some of our fall crops that we have sales closing dates on. So the couple other tidbits there would be because MCO was introduced, it was introduced at a 65% subsidy, and that 65% subsidy then was also applied to ECO. And it makes some sense because it's got the same subsidy level as the hurricane insurance, which is 65%. That's the HIPAA insurance. So it makes some sense that it's also at 65. However, margin protection itself will remain at its current subsidy level. So in the 25 year, we'll have ECO at 65%, SCO at 65%. In 26, we'll have ECO at 65%. We'll have the new product MCO, and then SCO we'll see. We'll see what the Farm Bill brings. But for right now, it's also at 65%. So a lot of acronyms there. Save me from myself, Ken. What does this mean for our risk management strategies for 2025?
Well, I tell you, this last year, I know a lot of producers looked at ECO trying to decide, is that the right thing? Because it, like you mentioned, $30 an acre. It's not just it's a no-brainer decision. When payments have occurred, it's a no-brainer, right? If I could go back in time, I'd put it on last year. But the reality is now, if we're in that $18 range, that completely changes your buying decision on that. Now, this is a product that's going to have great play because, to do this as an option, because I've done on my own farm some years where I've just done a put to protect from a cost standpoint, just to keep that cost down. Now the reality is getting a yield component with the price protection at that much of a reduction becomes, I don't want to use the word no-brainer, but it definitely changes that buying decision dramatically, and gives you that individual, or that extra 9% coverage that you just can't do on the public market for that level.
Right. I think, just to be clear, because I think sometimes we do use the term no-brainer. I think I want to be clear on that. It's not so much that it's a no-brainer. It's just that with that subsidy level, the value just becomes so significant that it's hard to ignore. It's like, does everybody need a Cadillac Escalade? No. But what if the Cadillac Escalade was only $20,000?
You'd think pretty hard about it.
You'd think
right?
a little harder about having a Cadillac Escalade, right? And that's kind of what ECO is, right? It's a high-end product out there that just got really cheap. And so that's how we look at it. And so is it something that everybody needs? No, but darn it if it isn't a really tremendous value.
Yeah, so it's something you definitely have to take a look at. If you haven't looked at it, it's a product that needs to be considered and weigh the pros and cons for your operation. But that price drop changes that decision significantly.
Yeah. So a couple other takeaways just because of this subsidy change. I think it opens up more regions to ECO. I think we'll see it sold and bought more outside of where it's been bought previously, which is probably the middle eastern part of the Corn Belt. Is probably the heaviest area. I think you'll see that expand out of the Corn Belt a little bit and also to other crops. So we get a little focused here on corn, soybeans, and wheat, but shoot, we have ECO on all sorts of crops. We have it on dry beans and sugar beets and forage production and all sorts of other things I can't even name and think about
Yeah.
right now. Canola. I mean, it's out there on everything.
Yeah.
I think it's well over 30 crops that ECO is available on. So once again, do you necessarily need it on all those crops? Maybe not, but the value is so tremendous, it's hard to ignore.
Well, one thing to add to that too, just to remind our viewers that ECO doesn't require a underlying multi-peril to marry up to it. So you could have the 95 to 86 band of ECO or 90 to 86 band of ECO, and then leave a gap and do your 75 or 70 multi-peril. So you're not required to have it touching each other from an RMA standpoint. So that's also, if you want to move that risk strategy toward the higher triggers on a county base, the flexibility in the product is there.
Yes. Most definitely. Oh, and a reminder there too, unlike SCO, ECO not tied in with those FSA programs. So not only do we have a great value, but we don't have those other considerations. We're not weighing it against whatever we're giving up at the FSA in terms of FSA programs. So also nice there. Couple other things I think that will happen because of this. I do think we'll see some shift away from margin protection because margin will not have the advantage of this additional subsidy. It'll just have the same one it has previously. Um, I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's nice to have that fall price, but when you're saving $11 an acre and ECO was already a little cheaper to start with, it just feels like we're going to shift a little bit more away from margin protection. And ramp FMH, we've had a long history with ramp, and it's been a roller coaster of good and bad. In some places, we've had some good years and bad years with ramp, but it's been a product that's been a hot one. I think we'll see a pretty massive shift away from ramp as well. Ramp is a fine product where it is, but we just can't offer it at anywhere close to the rate that
Yeah.
ECO is.
Yeah. That subsidy, we just can't, 65%, that's significant.
Yes. Ken, maybe I'll hear your opinions on this. Will we see a shift away from hail and wind?
Yeah, that's going to vary by region. If you're in an area that constantly is getting, I mean, where your frequency of hail and wind is, it's going to happen every year. Probably not just because that's your number one peril. You're going to buy that peril. But if you're in say a 1 in 4 years, you're getting hit with those perils. Yeah, I think absolutely. Because now you're adding in, because you are getting wind and hail with ECO. It's at a county level. But if your farm is getting hit every year, I think you're still going to probably stay with wind and hail. But if you're not, and you're maybe that 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4, or more, I think you'll see producers say, let me get the price protection, let me get the yield protection, and every other peril that is part of the multi-peril. So it's going to vary by area.
Yeah.
I mean, Nebraska, I don't know. That's a state that gets a lot of wind and hail, and I mean, we'll have to see what they do.
I don't know.
Interesting.
It will be. It will be. I do think we'll see a little bit of it. I don't think we'll see a ton, but it is going to be perhaps a shifting of where we place our premium and what buckets do we place our premium. So Ken, I came up with a few ideas on how we can fit ECO into our insurance package. And some of these have already been put into place by farmers in the past, but I just added some new ones here that might be more relevant with the subsidy change. The first one I had is to just simply buy it. The value's there. Maybe somebody's buying 80% enterprise unit today, but they want that price protection. They want that extra yield protection, and it's at a reasonable cost, but it triggers at 95%. We're getting payments almost every other year on ECO in many counties. What do you think about that strategy?
Yeah, I think that especially with this subsidy increase, we're definitely going to see that the producers that were on the fine line, when they're looking at that $30 an acre, now drop to 18. We're going to see a lot of producers drop into that, just buy it, because it's got to a point where that's a much more palatable purchase for the operation.
Right. And to be clear, that $30 an acre is probably at the high end. That'd be on top of a revenue policy at 100% of the price at 95% level. So that's about as expensive as it could have gotten. And now about as expensive as it can be is $19 an acre.
Yeah.
So it's a great buy. How about lowering our individual level and then buying ECO. So we gain some savings, but then putting ECO out there, which is going to place our liability up at a much higher level, say 95 versus 85 or 95 versus 80. What do you think about a strategy like that?
Yeah, I'm seeing that already in some of my states, especially, like we get in the Dakotas where the underlying multi-peril is just more expensive. Now putting that top in, getting that higher trigger, especially if the expected county yield is good for your county, I know that's going to be an uptick in, especially in the Dakotas. But when we have, we have so many dollars we want to spend. I mean, their total package is usually more than what I'm spending at an 85. So I can see producers saying, yeah, I want to put that top end 95 on. I'm going to keep my underlying at that 75 or 70, just so I have decent coverage for prevent plant. So it's no question that is going to be a play in our states with the higher underlying multi-peril costs.
Awesome. And of course, we can't forget about a product we've talked on here before about, which is ECO Plus, which helps cover in those spot losses. So for instance, if we were in Nebraska and we happened to be in one of those counties where it didn't trigger, but we did have some hail or wind, ECO Plus is there to protect us from those losses that are not covered under the county plan. And frankly, with the change in the subsidy, we can now buy ECO and ECO Plus for very close to the same rate as what ECO was by itself previously.
Yeah.
What do you think about doing something like that?
Yeah, there's no question we're going to have demand for that product. My big fear is we're going to have enough capacity. But there's this year we're seeing that package worked well, where producers were hit worse than the county was, and that plus picked them up where the county stopped, which is what that product's designed to do. So no question that's going to be a very popular product next spring.
Yes. Any other takeaways you have just in general, Ken? Some early conversations you've had with agents or thoughts yourself, either from the release of the 23 yields or looking forward to 25?
Yeah. Already I've had a number of agents this week reaching out and saying how much they've enjoyed calling and letting their growers remind them of these payments that are coming that people forgot about. So it's like, say, a nice influx of cash to their operation. But on top of that, it's like, okay, we didn't coach you down the wrong path. This was the right product, and it performed and give a lot of producers that understanding of how this product works. So I think that was a positive. It's always good to have a year of some losses just to show, hey, it is working like we've told you. And this year, 23 definitely performed, provided that type of support for that. So yeah, I'm excited for 25. This is going to be a fun selling season.
It is. I'm excited too. We have talked at least a little bit on the podcast about a new quoting system that we have coming out at FMH for 2025 as well. And not for fall, but for spring crops, we expect that the quoting system will be up and running. And of course, ECO Plus, these changes are all going to be incorporated into that new quoting system. And some of the tools we have in there, I'm really excited to see what they look like with this new subsidy and how they can show the value of ECO. So excited for our agents to be able to use those tools and show farmers how valuable something like ECO and ECO Plus can be.
Yeah, Ryan and I are both on the development of that product. We're going to be calling, I think I can give the name, can I? FMHQ.
FMHQ.
And it's like waiting for this baby to be delivered. We've been working on this thing for a long time. So I'm so excited to have that brought out and giving agents and customers some tools that can have some look back and some analysis. So yeah, I couldn't be happier. So it's a great year coming. 2025 is going to be the best year ever.
No, thank you for that, Ken. And thanks again for joining. Now, Ken, I am going to get my head shaved tomorrow night. Are you joining me?
I am not. You must have got the lottery because I got mine a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So I did contribute to your fund.
Much appreciated. I have had a lot of donations out there. I know a lot of the folks listening to this podcast or watching have donated. So very much appreciate it. And next time you see me, I will be a little shorter on hair. So maybe just missed a couple days to see the real white head, or maybe sunburnt by the time I have a couple days under my belt. But looking forward to participating in what will be a great event. And we've already raised a lot of money. I know we're going to raise some more, but again, it's for St. Baldrick's. It's for childhood cancer research and awareness. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, great job.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And any closing remarks, Ken, before I sign us off here?
Like I say, looking forward to 2025. I'm just hoping that we'll move some of the rain from southern Minnesota and northern Iowa to other parts of the country that need it, because we need our crops to turn around, because it's a challenging year in that geography. So
wonderful. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Ken, for joining. And thank you to all who are listening or watching. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast or YouTube channel. And we'll talk at you again soon.
You've been listening to FMH Insurecast. We appreciate you joining us today and would like to hear from you. If you have questions about today's topic or an idea to share for an upcoming podcast, you can contact us at fmhpodcast@fmh.com. Thanks for listening. This podcast is intended for information purposes only. See policy provisions, terms, and conditions for details. Products underwritten by Farmers Mutual Hail Insurance Company of Iowa and its affiliates, West Des Moines, Iowa. Farmers Mutual Hail is an equal opportunity provider.